think we will go ahead and start, and then everyone else can find us along the way. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I know for some of you it's very early. For some of us, it's a quite appropriate time in the afternoon, and for some of you, it may be actually quite late. But that's the nature of Zoom panels these days. My name is Astrid Haas, and on behalf of the Local Public Sector Alliance, I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar today. This is the next webinar in the Sub-Saharan African webinar series on decentralization and localization. And today we'll be discussing what is my favorite topic, namely cities, and how we can think of decentralization and localization in conjunction with ensuring a framework for resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and equitable urban development. This follows on from the series of webinars that were held last week and the forthcoming webinars in this week that all focus on decentralization trends across the continent and causes and effects of these in different parts of Africa. We have a very esteemed panel joining us today who I will introduce along the way, but we all represent different parts of the continent, different sectors, and different areas of work. But what combines us all is that we all believe in the power of urbanization and the power of decentralization to be able to support this moving forward. But before we go into the substance today, let me first take a minute to introduce the Local Public Sector Alliance, which is led by Jamie Boex and Selda Yilmaz, which is a global alliance of champions for more efficient and inclusive decentralization. It was established as a platform for knowledge sharing by practitioners and scholars working on decentralization and localization, not only in Africa, but around the world. And it brings together experts, global organizations, policy practitioners, and civil society organizations, government officials, and the private sector from around the world, all combined by with an interest in achieving more inclusive responses and an efficient public sector. The objective of this global webinar series on decentralization and local development is to elevate this debate around decentralization and localization around the world. As such, we're not just interested in understanding the state of decentralization in different parts of the world today, although we understand that this is a good starting point to be able to frame our conversations. But we really want to get to the bottom of the forces that drive decentralization reforms and identify really workable and operational opportunities for different stakeholders to be able to champion this and provide more concretely an inclusive public sector, inclusive and accountable public sector. The global webinar series in its entirety is presented by the Local Public Sector Alliance in partnership with the World Bank, the United Nations Development Programme, and the United Nations Capital Development Fund. Today's webinar session is also being co-hosted by the International Growth Center Cities That Work initiative. A few housekeeping rules, although I think we're all pretty good at Zoom webinars these days. I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that this event is being recorded. The video highlights both of this event, but also of the past ones, if you've missed them, will be made available on decentralization.net, the Local Public Sector Alliance's website. All presenters and panelists today are speaking in their own personal capacity and not on behalf of their organizations. Second, the webinar version of Zoom allows participants to ask questions via the Q&A button. If you have questions for any of the panelists, please use this feature at any time during the whole webinar. We will collate these and have a discussion around these at the end of the panelists' opening remarks. We have a lot of exciting content to cover over the coming 90 minutes. So to use our time most efficiently and effectively as possible, if panelists have PowerPoint presentations, they will share them from their own computers, or failing technology, we'll find a backup solution. But at the same time, we ask panelists, but also those asking questions, to keep their remarks succinct, to keep to time, so that we can really ensure the richest discussion as possible. So now that we've got those housekeeping rules out of the way, let's actually jump into the very exciting part of our webinar today, which is the substance, and which is cities. So as most of you on this webinar will know, and our panelists will definitely know, arguably Africa's most major opportunity of the coming decades is urbanization. No country across history or across the globe has achieved economic development without urbanizing, and Africa is currently the fastest urbanizing place on the globe. To date, however, the gains from urbanization have not been realized. And in a major part, this is due to governments, particularly local governments, which are struggling to effectively plan, manage, and therefore make the necessary investments in infrastructure and public services at a city level to accommodate the large number of people who are moving very quickly into our cities in search of opportunity. Unleashing the economic power of urbanization will only be realized with the right authorizing environment that provides for adequate decentralization functions for cities to fulfill their role, but also to be able to finance and fund it. As the recent COVID-19 pandemic has shown, particularly in many parts of Africa, where it has also not only played out as a health crisis, but as an economic crisis, and in particular as an urban economic crisis, when it comes down to it, at the forefront of service provision, at the forefront of local service provision are city governments. And especially in the emergency situations that as we have experienced over the past couple of years. However, revenue raising abilities and access to financing, as well as overall capacity in local governments, has been severely constrained. And this is something that we will explore throughout today's webinar. At the same time, we like to always think of Africa's challenges, but we've also had a number of successful examples and experiences. And through a number of case studies that we will have presented, we want to highlight these to you too, because as I noted, we really want to get down to the essence about what is practical, not only in terms of decentralization more broadly, in terms of Africa on a regional level, but obviously every country and every city is different, so how this can be tailored accordingly.